This is a powerful, powerful hymn. It's a song. And I'm going to explain why this song appears here in Colossians in just a moment. And it begins with Colossians chapter 1, verses 15 through 20. Now, he has, in verse 14, talked already about Jesus. 13 and 14. God has rescued us from the dominion of darkness, brought us into the kingdom of the Son he loves, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins. And you could jump from verse 14 right to 21. In fact, it makes more sense to do so. But then there's this interlude here. Beginning in verse 15, almost interrupts the flow of Paul's thought. The Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn over all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. Notice how often as I read this, that all things, he is head of all, things like that. And also notice how often he says he is the first, which in Hellenistic thought would mean that he's the greatest. We don't exactly think that way always. We do in contests. If you're first, you're the greatest, and that's the kind of the nature of that thought that Paul has here in this hymn. In other ways, we may think that if the last is the greatest, the best is yet to come, the last is the greatest. But in this sense, it's kind of in the context of an athletic event. First, winner, best. Okay, the Son is the image of the invisible God, the firstborn of all creation. For in him all things were created, things in heaven and on earth, visible and invisible, whether thrones or powers or rulers or authorities. All things have been created through him and for him. He's before all things, and in him all things hold together. And he is the head of the body of the church. He is the beginning and the firstborn from among the dead, so that in everything he might have the supremacy. For God was pleased to have all his fullness dwell in him, and through him to reconcile to himself all things, whether things on earth or things in heaven, by making peace through his blood shed on the cross. Now you can switch from verse 14, in whom we have redemption, the forgiveness of sins, go right to 21. Once you were alienated from God, as always explained what he means. We have redemption, forgiveness of sins. Once you were alienated from God and were enemies in your minds because of your evil behavior. But now he has reconciled you. See, verse 21 really explains verse 14. So why do we have this interlude, 15 through 20? Well, Paul does this frequently. He starts to consider the great mysteries of the Christian faith or the ways of God, and something just seems to overcome him. And when it does, he breaks into a song. We find that in Philippians 2, 5 through 11. He says to the church of Philippi, have this mind among yourselves, which is yours in Christ Jesus. And then he goes into what is rhythmic, poetic. It's a song. Who, though he was in the form of God, did not count equality with God a thing to be grasped, but emptied himself, taking the form of a servant, being born in human likeness, and became obedient unto God even to the point of death. So that God has raised him up, and so at the name of Jesus every knee should bow and tongue confess that Jesus Christ is Lord, to the glory of God the Father. Another hymn. There's another one in 1 Corinthians. Paul is trying to explain the mysteries of spiritual gifts, and he says, I'm going to show you a more excellent way. If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels but have not love, I'm a noisy gong or a clanging cymbal. And so on forth and so forth. And you know that one probably as well as any of the other places that Paul does this. Or in the 11th chapter of the book of Romans, he is trying to explain the complexities of the mysteries of God and the things that are so hard for us to accept. I mean, why these are things that we proclaim that are a scandal to the Jews and folly to the Gentiles. But he's still trying to explain this. And he's trying to explain the unique relationship of Jews in this whole enterprise. And he has already affirmed that his brethren, brothers and sisters as Jews, that they're all going to be saved in chapter 9 and 10, but it's still part of a holy mystery for him. And it seems like he gets caught up in the complexity of trying to explain all of this. And he comes only to this place where he breaks out in what we call doxology, for from him, through him, and to him are all things. To him be the power and the glory forever. Romans 11:33. Paul does that, you know. Whether he's wrestling with a difficult concept of faith or theology, or whether he's dealing with a congregational issue and problem, or whether he's just trying to explain the mystery at the heart of the Christian faith, and in this case, to a people he's never met, he's not part, he didn't start the church of Colossae. Whatever it is, whenever Paul finds himself all but overwhelmed, he stands back, it seems to me, and takes a gaze upward and just considers the glory and the magnificence of God. And all of a sudden his heart is full and he breaks out in praise and thanksgiving. Because when words fail and everything else seems beyond our ability to explain or comprehend, when all of that takes a hold of us, I think that's the moment we're grasped by the mystery of God. And when we're grasped by the mystery of God, and that's a powerful experience, when you're grasped by that overwhelming sense of the holy, when you are grasped by that recognition that all things in creation seem to be held together. That's what he says about Christ in that hymn. He holds all things together. There's a oneness to all of creation. And when you're grasped by the fact that life is only whole and complete then, if all things are held together in Christ, life is only whole and complete when we are reconciled to God. And that thought overwhelms Paul, and he breaks into this powerful hymn. He couldn't help but sing it. I remember a time I was with a couple guys, we were out fishing. The water was flowing over the rocks ahead of us. We were downstream. I was casting for trout. It was a beautiful, beautiful day. Crisp, cool air, the sun was shining, and all of a sudden a rainbow trout just leaped into the air after a bug. Didn't happen to be on the end of my cast, but that didn't matter because the sun grabbed the colors of that rainbow trout, and I looked all around. And all of a sudden my heart was just filled with the gladness and the joy. I was just overwhelmed by the greatness of God. I wanted to sing. I was with a couple guys, you don't do that, you know. If I'd have broke out in some kind of song at that point, they'd have said, something going on with Lew over there. We've maybe been in this creek too long, it's time to go home. You know, something like that. But I just had that in my heart. Just that overwhelming sense that I have life, I have being, and I did nothing to make that happen. I didn't earn this right to be born. We're big on rights, and it's good. We should be, you know. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal, and today it's men and women. And they're endowed by their Creator with certain inalienable rights. We think about rights a lot. But one of the rights, well, I may have the right to live free from fear and live, well, or whatever we might enumerate as the rights that we all have. I didn't have some right to be born. I didn't earn something, an award or something that said, now you get to go and be a baby and grow up in this world and have a life because you won this award. I at least don't remember that ever happening. I didn't choose to be born. I didn't earn some right to be born. There's no other way to say it. I mean, I could stumble around in so many ways trying to explain how I didn't feel like this life was something I merited, but it all comes down to this. Life is a gift. We have been given breath and being, and not by our own choosing. And when you recognize that, that Not only is your life a gift, but everything, the beauty of it, rainbow trout leaping into the sunlight, the crispness of a cool fall day, the water flowing down the stream, flowing over those rocks. I've done whitewater rafting in Costa Rica, where the rocks were pretty treacherous at times. And it's like I said to the kids, after we got down out of the rainforest and went through all those 5s and 4s on the Picard River in Costa Rica, and I got to the end of it, man, I was shouting and celebrating and talking the world with everybody else because we had done this, you know. We had gone clear to the top of the rainforest, up in the mountains someplace, and came all the way down, and we had survived, and I gave thanks for that. I mean, it was just a wonderful day in that regard. So there's something about surviving hard times and coming out, things looking more positive and having better options for our future, you know, not being afraid or anxious and overcoming great obstacles and all that. Celebration at the end of the trial, victory, all of these are reasons that we give thanks. But the experience I'm trying to describe, where Paul breaks into a song glorifying the supremacy of Christ, is a recognition that everything is a gift. And my life has a source beyond myself. And that all good things in this creation, in some sense, were made just for us. Not just for me, but for us. That God laid it all out for us. And it's all a gift to us. Thanksgiving is praise. Now, Thanksgiving can be, as I said, for good things that happen at the end of strife and trial, or for the blessings that we receive, whatever good they are. But I've seen people giving thanks when they didn't have the blessings that I thought allowed us to give thanks. I've told you before, maybe I'm going to use this illustration again. I was in Houston. I did my internship in Houston, in North Houston, in a congregation, and then I went down into the Spanish areas of Houston and did a summer education program. And this was a pretty desolate area and a lot of poverty and ghettos I'd have to go through to get to the place where we were doing the education program. And I remember one particular rainy, miserable day. And I think my mood matched the day, you know, how rainy and miserable it was. My mood matched that day. And I was probably grumbling. I know I was. I was grumbling. I didn't want to go and have to do this education program. We were playing things outside, and I had to shift thoughts and figure out what we were going to do inside with all the kids. And I was grumbling all the way there. And I stopped at a stop sign. And it was right across from a lot that was empty and scattered and covered with a lot of litter and broken bottles and things like this, and dilapidated housing behind it, your typical ghetto scene, and it's dismal. And there on a sidewalk was a young girl, and she was doing cartwheels. And it was drizzling and miserable, and she was doing cartwheels and playing in front of this lot. That's praise. That's praise. Nothing wrong with counting your blessings. But I don't know what she had to account for that day. And as I was counting things up in that particular moment, I wasn't thinking of blessings. So praise is something more. It's good to count your blessings, but praise is something more. And it's that something that allowed that little girl in a very dismal scene to do cartwheels. And I think that's the hymn that Paul's singing. The grandeur, the glory, the greatness of everything. Especially Jesus Christ. Happy Praise Day, too.